Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I appreciate you joining us as we continue to celebrate so many incredible people working across this state to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. You know, there's always a little bit of a narrative to the show that's I hope is on the positive side. One of the things I like to do is share from this digital history book that I get every morning the various quotes, and one popped up today that got my attention, and I think it's really important. It means that we should learn from our failures. Failure really isn't a bad thing, actually. Failure is an opportunity to learn lessons, to enable us to grow and be better, and to set our sights high and achieve our goals in life. I mean, sometimes making mistakes is the way to achieve those goals. And one of the things that observed in the history book this morning was that the co-founder of Microsoft, Paul Allen, died back in 2018. You know, I hear the name Paul Allen, and I actually have to pause for a second and remind myself that he actually has passed away. After hearing that name so long in association with his efforts at Microsoft. But one of the things he said along the way, and this is, gosh, you think about a software engineer, someone who's building a company like Microsoft with Bill Gates, to say this, he really means it. And this is, it's about trial and error. But he says, in my experience, each failure contains the seeds of your next success, if you're willing to learn from it. You know, some people kind of ponder. I've seen people who have really pondered a failure and not work to try to overcome it by understanding what they can learn from it, and then shifting gears. Some of the most successful people that I have met have sought the opportunity to fail in their career, so they can. It helps them learn, and then they set their sights higher and higher and higher, and they will tell you that failure is often your friend. And if you have a successful goal in life, I would think that accepting that is really important. So when Paul Allen said, in my experience, each failure contains seeds of your next success, if you're willing to learn from it, he meant it. And he proved it through his life that was the approach that he was taking. I just thought it was a really good one. I look back on my career, it certainly was the case as well. I've been looking forward to touching base with Sean Tindell, the commissioner for the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, someone I enjoy checking in with regularly. Big, really important headquarters christening happened this week, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But without any further ado, let me welcome Sean back to the show. How you doing, my friend?
Doing good. It's a beautiful day here in Mississippi, and blessed to be at the Department of Public Safety. You know, when I hear Paul Allen, of course, I think of the Microsoft guy, but then I also think of the movie American Psycho, and the one of the characters in there was a guy named Paul Allen. So it's funny how those names kind of cross. And then just to your point, it had me thinking a lot. I love coaching baseball. I love baseball. I found an old middle school report card where my geometry teacher said Sean spends too much time talking about baseball and not enough time studying geometry. So it's always been a big part of my life. But I tell these kids when I'm coaching them, we can't be afraid of making errors. We can't be afraid of striking out. And that, baseball to me is one of the sports that can best prepare you for life, because, the kids that get down and start crying, the next time they get in the box, they're going to strike out again if they don't put that last strikeout behind them. And so, it certainly has given me a lot of direction in life. And one of the things I always say, much to what Paul Allen said, was, when it comes to baseball knowledge is a foundation built upon making errors. And that's how you learn to play the game.
Well, look, you go back in your career as a lawyer, as an assistant district attorney, as a state senator, Mississippi Court of Appeals, all these things that you've been involved in. I mean, there's a lot of trial and error and learning. And, you've mastered that along every step that you're in. And then, of course, you're in this really important position today at the Mississippi Department of Public Safety. But you draw from those experiences every single day, don't you?
Absolutely. And a lot of people, I've had a very good career and I'm very blessed. But some folks forget that my first political race, I ran in Harrison County for county prosecutor. And I lost to Herman Cox, who's been a great county prosecutor, but lost by 1%, and I think what helped me propel my political career after that was how I handled the loss. That I think we did it with a certain amount of dignity, and people saw that we worked hard, and I learned from that and carried that experience on through my career. So, again, losing and failure can't define you. And I tell our folks every day that who you are today is important. It's great, but it doesn't define who you are tomorrow. And we have to constantly be willing to look at ourselves and redefine ourselves and try to make ourselves better.
It's so interesting to look at your career and the role that you play, and we'll get into some of what's happening in your world these days. But I would think one of the most, I don't know, your department is so multifaceted. I can't say one of the most important things, because literally, when you're dealing with public safety in every aspect of what you do, it's important, and you've got a strong team that you're leading. And you really rely on them to do a great job. But if you look at one of the bigger developments, let's put it that way, that has happened over the course of the last few years, it's been the strengthening of and sort of the recalibration of the Capitol Police. When you think about what's happened in downtown Jackson and this zone that is part of the Mississippi legislature and the state capitol, and the role that the Capitol Police plays and the growing role that it plays, and the way it has to coordinate with local law enforcement and so on, all with the focus to try to make Jackson a safer place. When you look at how that has evolved, the leadership that you've had to put in place, the massive amount of training that's had to be put in place, and then more recently, new headquarters. When you think about that headquarters and all of the steps leading up to that new headquarters, it's been moving fast, hasn't it?
It has. And yesterday when we did our ribbon cutting for the new headquarters, I did bring up that I took office in June of 2020. There was sometime in the fall of 2020, heading into the 2021 legislative session, I got a call from Liz Welch, who was the director of the Department of Finance and Administration, and that's where Capitol Police had traditionally been held. And she said, what do you think about Capitol Police coming over to the Department of Public Safety? And we talked about it and went through it some, and both agreed that might be a good place for Capitol Police to be in the future. I don't think we ever, when we were talking about it at that moment, thought about the growth that would be coming and of course the challenges that it presented. But one of the things that I brought up at the meeting is if from a public safety mindset, from a public servant's mindset, if we stop focusing on pride of ownership and stop worrying so much about the challenges that can be presented by new opportunities and just embrace it, a lot of great things can happen. And that's what we had. Capitol Police came over much because Liz Welch wasn't concerned about pride of ownership. She wanted them to be part of a law enforcement agency. And then when they got here, we knew there would be some hard work, some challenges, but we weren't afraid to take them on. And with that came a lot of great opportunities, because then I sat down with the governor and he said, Sean, crime has been a real problem in Jackson. If Capitol Police is with you, we can work with Highway Patrol and MBN and the other law enforcement divisions and really enhance the services they're providing beyond just being a security agency. And then it really blossomed from there, because then the legislature got behind it. They wanted to expand it. But it all started off with a little conversation where somebody wasn't concerned about pride of ownership, and the guy on the other end of the phone wasn't concerned about the hard work that it was going to take to make it happen. And then we had all these opportunities that came from those challenges. And you look at where it's now, it's been a great success. I mean, Chief Lucky's done a great job. Our team here at DPS and the leadership, all the way from procurement to HR to Highway Patrol and our other divisions, have embraced bringing these officers on board and growing it from about 70 people total to almost 200 total.
That's really a massive undertaking, and you mentioned Lucky, but the reality is you got to have great leadership, and it does make sense that it be part of the Department of Public Safety. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer now that you look at it, because what you're able to draw from, the economies of scale that you can create career opportunities for people inside your organization who may aspire to want to do that, and then the support side is, you can't overstate how important that is.
It makes so much sense. I mean, and you look at models in other states, whether it's Louisiana with the LSP and all that they encompass. Alabama has the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, in which they put most of their law enforcement under one umbrella. So it certainly makes some sense to move in those directions where we can. And for Capitol Police, it definitely makes sense considering the role that Highway Patrol plays at the Capitol and NBI and our NBN. And so just a lot of great things came from it. And again, leadership. Chief Lucky tackled that with a vision of enhancing law enforcement in the city of Jackson.
Hey, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what has the result been of Capitol Police. There's a lot more to talk about in terms of the Department of Public Safety here in Mississippi, and we'll get into some of that. But we'll continue our conversation with Commissioner Sean Tindell when we come back. See you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I have Commissioner Sean Tindell, who's the head of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety and a regular member of my guests here at the Ricky Mathews Show, somebody I really enjoyed checking in with. You know, Sean, you look back at the history of the Capitol Police, and you alluded to a lot of that in the last segment, but I remember when the debates were happening in the legislature and there was a lot of drive to increase the size of the Capitol Police and to recalibrate it and to really focus on what was becoming a very compelling case for action, that crime in our capital city was an issue. And we were worried about it, and the legislature wanted to address it. We wanted people who visited the Capitol to feel safe, and there was a growing concern that they weren't safe. And that was not just perception, it was real. And the state decided to do something about it. I remember a lot of people criticized whether we should do this or not and whether, this would replace, Jackson Police and all that. But your focus has been from the beginning to collaborate with the partners in that area and do this as a team effort. And the outcome has been very positive. But it's taken a lot of communication, a lot of hard work, a lot of building these partnerships. And from where you're sitting, it looks pretty good, doesn't it?
I think it does. And every day presents different challenges. There will certainly be incidences where we have folks that don't do things the right way. And so one of the things that we try to do is create this culture of accountability at DPS where we hold folks accountable when they don't do right. But we reward everybody that's doing their job the way they should. And part of that, too, is early on, I think there was some fear from Jackson and Jackson PD that we were trying to take over the city. And it's never been about that for us. It's been about the overall and the overreaching need for a safe capital city. And I told our folks early on, we might disagree with some of the things that go on in the city of Jackson, but we're not going to be critical of their leaders. We're not going to be critical of their police department. And we're not going to be critical of the citizens. We're going to do the job that we're here to do, which is a public safety function, not throw other people under the bus. And all too often in politics, it just seems to happen way too often. Focus on your job, focus on what you're here to do, and the rest will take care of itself. And I think once the leaders at Jackson PD and the folks in the city realized that we were here to help and that we could be a force multiplier and that we weren't going to be criticizing them publicly, that, if we had our differences, we would deal with it behind closed doors. But we were here to get everybody on the same page and be good partners. And then when you join in Hinds County and you join in the Fed, and what we were able to do with Operation Unified, where we took our federal partners, our county, with the sheriff's office, city, and state, and we actually launched a initiative in the city of Jackson working together. I think it really highlighted the importance of what we can accomplish if we work together.
Well, listen, if you think about it from the perspective of a Jackson police patrolman, before the legislature allocated this new money and before this sort of this entire new strategic approach started to take place. If I'm a patrolman in Jackson and I'm watching the crime rise and I'm seeing that we don't really have enough resources to address it and so on and so on and so on. I'm probably liking this, that I'm actually getting some help. And I want people to feel safe. And I'm worried about the level of violence that I'm seeing, and it's concerning me. And I don't feel safe myself. They have to be, and if they're being honest with their own thoughts, and you probably are getting some of this feedback, they probably like that this has happened because it's helped them.
Absolutely. And look, I'm a big believer in capitalistic markets, and competition is good in the private sector, and competition is also good in the public sector. And so when I think we came out with a little fire in our bellies about public safety and everybody was getting excited, it kind of lit a fire at Jackson PD as well. And their folks started getting more excited. And then and one of the things I'm really most proud of is law enforcement salaries across the state, that we've seen a significant increase on the coast and North Mississippi and even Central Mississippi. And part of that was, again, creating that competitive nature where everybody's salaries were going up and we're better able to recruit good officers. And so it really has been I think a good time for law enforcement in general. I know that it's always got these challenges, but I think back where we were when starting salaries just a few years ago were in their 30s for a law enforcement officer, and now many of your communities are up to 40, 50, even 60,000 in some areas. I think those have been major improvements, and it's because we've created this kind of competitive balance where we're fighting for really the better good of the public and public safety.
We really are. You and I have chatted about this before, but one of the most profound experiences that I had being publisher of the Times-Picayune in New Orleans was that I developed a really good relationship with Mayor Mitch Landrieu, and he would come and visit with us, and the editorial board would come visit with me. I'd actually go have lunch with him periodically over in the mayor's office. And one of the things he kept was an album, and it had pictures of every person who had been murdered. Okay. And he said the reason he keeps it is that he wanted to never forget how violent things had become and his role as the mayor and what he had to do. So one of the things they would do periodically is they would bring leaders from the various gangs, and gangs were not, Crips and Bloods like the old days, but they were neighborhood based and violent and young. And some of these were repeat offenders, and they knew who they were, and they would bring them in and have, you could call it a tough love session, but it wasn't quite that. But it was they would communicate with them about sort of what they were doing, et cetera. And he would pull some of them aside. I mentioned to you, I think at one point about this, and have conversations with them. And what surprised him was that they were very scared. You would think they were just really tough guys, and they were, because of this culture they were being raised in, and they were having to be involved in crime and in some cases murder at a very young age, and it was all about surviving. And so he would have these conversations when he told me that the young people he was coming in contact with today, they had so much fear that they didn't expect to actually live through today. And so a lot of the decisions they were making were based on that. And the peer pressure that was on them, and that they were literally scared to death. I mean, it was, now some weren't, some were just punks, and that's the way they were going about it. But it was a lot about the situation. Well, one of the things that's happened on YouTube recently, and you may have seen this, but there's been these YouTube series showing what's happening in the inner cities, and it would say this is one of the deadliest places in America, and it will go there. I think they did one in New Orleans. They've done some in Mississippi. And you go meet some of the young people that are involved in crime and what they're doing, and it's scary, buddy. It's scary when you start looking at it. And it makes the point very clearly when you watch this and the culture that they're part of. Like, for example, they're doing this interview and a car drives by, and all the young men that are being interviewed immediately are ducking. They're worried that somebody that's driving by might shoot them. So that's the world that they're in. And it makes the point, it creates a very compelling case for why there has to be law enforcement. But there's a trend in America that is very troubling, and sometimes the only way to face it is with law enforcement. But you see that, don't you?
We do, and you forwarded me some of these videos. I think that highlighted Jackson and Morehead, Mississippi, where they were interviewing some of these young people. And then I forwarded that on to Colonel Haynes of the Mississippi Highway Patrol and Colonel Keith Davis of our Mississippi Law Enforcement Division that we have here at DPS. And both those individuals are, products of the Jackson metro area that have gone on to have very successful careers in law enforcement. So that they have grown up, and will tell you they grew up in some tough neighborhoods. and they've been in some of the streets that these young individuals come from. And so we've had multiple meetings where we've tried to look at ways that they could actually go into these communities and show, hey, I'm an African-American individual that grew up in the same gang neighborhoods that you did and you are, and there is a pathway to a better way, and show them that they can be successful. So it really is striking when you see how young those individuals are and what they're facing. And I think the term they used was, and they were asked, should you get off the porch? And they said no. I would tell the younger me, stay on the porch, because once you get off the porch, it's a battle out there. And so that's a lot to face when you're 15, 16, 14, 13 years old. And then the impact that it has on your mind. So we've got to figure out a way. Chief Davis of the Jackson PD used to have a saying, and I agree with him. We can't just police our way out of everything. We got to have good police. We got to have good law enforcement. But we got to find a way that we can show these young people that there is a pathway to a better life, and it doesn't have to include crime, and you don't have to get off the porch. You can have that safety there.
But that's a really good way to say it, and I had forgotten that I had forwarded a couple of those videos to you. I'm glad that you paid attention to them. But it's again, it's a way to kind of hear what's going on out there in the real world. It's a good way for people to, if people are interested in some of the challenges that law enforcement have today, you can go watch them yourself and have a better understanding that it's probably not what you think it is. It's a complicated, very nuanced, as you point out, younger, having access to weapons and drugs and all this going, it's not good. And we've got some work to do. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back on the other side as we continue our conversation with Commissioner Sean Tindell. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with Commissioner Sean Tindell, who's head of the Mississippi Department of Public Safety. And we're just talking about some of the challenges that law enforcement officers face in really across the nation. And certainly, I don't care what community you live in, no matter how small it is, you probably face some of what he and I were talking about. Sean, one of the, you said this, and you can't police your way out of it. There's really an important role for law enforcement to play, but it's so much more complex than that. There are roles at churches and nonprofits and schools and leaders in communities, fathers and mothers and grandparents. Everyone has a role. I'm struck, actually, one of my favorite mayors on the coast, and I have many favorites, but is Mayor Billy Knight in Moss Point. And one of the things, first of all, he says that he's planting the seeds of trees that he will never see the shade of. But one of the first things he did as mayor was he worked hard to have a referendum passed that would create recreational opportunities for young people in the city of Moss Point. He felt like one of the most important things he could do is keep young people busy and give them a safe place to go, et cetera. And what was really incredible about that is that Moss Point, who over its history, that it faced lots of challenges from a law enforcement point of view. The support he got from the community, the vote on that was just overwhelmingly positive. And they're in the process of now implementing that strategy. I mean, that's just one piece, but it's an important piece, finding safe places for people to go. And, it takes a village, doesn't it?
It does. And, I'm reminded my first job in the DA's office working for Kono Karana. He was a great mentor and somebody that I really looked up to and taught me a lot. And when I did run for my first public office, he said, you're going to learn that nobody that's ever been successful has done it by themselves. And true to that, I mean, anybody that I've ever looked at that's had success of any fashion never did it completely by themselves. They always had people along the way that were mentors and helped them. And so it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you are in life. It's going to take a village. It's going to take somebody being a mentor to help. And so when I look at a lot of these young people, it's whether it's coaches in recreation leagues or, Big Brother programs or the Boys and Girls Clubs, providing them good mentors is such a good strategy in helping change their lives and hopefully showing them that pathway to a better life. And look, not all of them are going to go on and run for public office or be CEO of Fortune 500 companies, but they might just be grow into a good man or woman and get married and raise good kids that might go on and do just amazing things. So, but it starts in that moment where we start building that foundation for a better tomorrow by providing good mentors and good leadership in our communities.
This is this my show is about having conversations about a large number of topics. It's typically not a political show, and this is not a political comment that I'm about to say, but it's hitting it on the surface, and it seems almost irresponsible to say that all the focus should be on the gun, that it's gun violence. Because what we're seeing in those videos is that we have a cultural problem, and we've got to go deal with it. And the one thing that the mayor of New Orleans, Mitch Landrieu, said to me repeatedly is said, "Man, we got here through generations." I mean, this is a generational problem. In the case of New Orleans, for example, over 50% of the African American men were unemployed, and desperation causes incredible things to happen. And then you add to that Katrina and the aftermath of Katrina, and just puts everything on steroids. The problem with a major storm like Katrina, incidentally, and we may have discussed this at some point before, but you think about any society is going to have challenges, mental health challenges. They may have law enforcement. They may have insurance. They may have affordable housing. There are lots of dimensions that affect a community. And so some of those issues may be near the edge or falling over the edge and needing immediate attention, and some of those may just be percolating. But when a storm like Katrina hits, almost every single one of those dimensions are now challenged in one way or the other, whether it was here in Mississippi or certainly in New Orleans. And when you shuffle the deck like that in such a big way, it can speed up every trend that you ever saw and put them all on steroids, and it makes it more challenging. Of course, you don't need a disaster to happen to know that we've got some challenges that are generational in nature, and it's going to take real leadership over a long period of time to be able to solve that problem. And I know that this is something you and the law enforcement community talk about all the time, and I bet it can be really frustrating knowing that there are very few short-term solutions.
There are, and look, I think folks that go into law enforcement generally do it because they want to make their community safer, and they're doing it for the right reasons. And so when they go into these communities and they see these young people that are committing these crimes, we can arrest them. And then if they get back out, they're going to be right back there on the same streets, probably doing the same thing. And it's frustrating for them because there isn't a lot of help for them at that point. And then especially when you consider that these young people now, they're killing each other. They've got guns. They're raised in this culture where that seems to be acceptable and prevalent to, if you've been disrespected, turn to using a gun to settle your differences. And so they get frustrated and they get burned out, and law enforcement doesn't know exactly how to handle it because they're not equipped to handle it. They are there to protect our communities and be law enforcement officers, and we expect so much more of them today. We expect them to be marriage therapists when they show up at a domestic dispute. We expect them to be mental health counselors when they engage with somebody that clearly has mental health issues and it's likely homeless. And we expect them to be able to be a youth counselor and when they're dealing with young people. And it puts a lot on the back of law enforcement, really too much. We need professionals in those fields that can address those issues. And I think we've got to look at that and say, hey, why are we asking our law enforcement to do all these different things when that's really not their job? Their job is for public safety, to enforce the laws, investigate crimes, not to be the mental health professionals that are needed in so many of these other places. Yeah, you want them to be a social worker. You want them to. They have to be a lawyer. There's so much law they have to know. It's tough. As Johnny Polis and I talked about recently. Right. Say it again. Oh, that was some feedback coming back. They had to be a constitutional scholar. Yeah, right. But anyway, Johnny Polis was on recently talking about you and I have talked about this in great detail, and we spent the whole show talking about it, but the importance of focusing on mental health, because when you're exposed to all those things and you're expected to be all those things, think of the wear and tear on people, law enforcement leaders, and from the front line all the way through. The frustrations can mount if you don't acknowledge them and understand them and help them with sort of processing that.
Thank goodness we're in a new day today where instead of saying tough it up, suck it up, we're telling people to, we're acknowledging that sometimes you need a little help, but it is tough, isn't it?
It is. And for law enforcement, if I have a bad day, I might slam my door. Who knows, maybe yell at somebody. But for a law enforcement officer out there in today's world, they cannot afford to have a bad day. They might not have slept last night. Maybe they had a sick kid. Maybe they were in an argument with their wife. Maybe they were concerned about, something going on down the road. But when they show up at work, they got to be on their A game for 10-hour shifts. And they can't afford to let those things percolate into their daily function, because as soon as they say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, yell at the wrong person, and it's all over social media, and then their mental health from there just continues to decline. So it really is a challenge for today's law enforcement. And I think hopefully with the work that Johnny's doing, Major Polis, through our mental health program and peer support program, that we can help address that so that we have better equipped law enforcement officers. And with that, hopefully they can percolate that into the community and also say, hey, this is clearly, in fact, we did a mental health summit recently with our law enforcement divisions, trying to bring together professionals from the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Health to say, hey, when we encounter these folks, we need y'all's help. And how do we get in touch with you to make sure that you can do what you do while we do what we do?
I thought Johnny did a great job of describing what you guys are working toward, and he likened it to people, and people can typically sort of get their head around this, to doing preventive maintenance on your car. And we don't tend to think about doing preventive. We think about preventive maintenance on ourselves physically, but we often don't think about that as mentally. And the mental is just as important as the physical, and that we need to address it and make sure that people know it's okay to express when you're having difficulties. And I think, I really do think, Sean, there's no doubt in my mind with your leadership and the team working together, addressing it openly and honestly, you're going to help save lives of law enforcement officers. There's no question in my mind about that.
Well, and look, I'll say this. Of course, we talked the last time about my knee replacement surgery that I had. Ahead of that, I kind of quit drinking alcohol, and I really haven't. I might have a beer or two here or there. But one thing that I've learned from that is, a lot of times because of the stress, and this happens, I think, with a lot of law enforcement officers, that they'll turn to alcohol. It'll kind of numb you, help you sleep, at least get to sleep. And so, again, these are all mental health issues that we can rely on each other to say, hey, there's another pathway. And what I've learned is that I kind of had this fog that was over my head gone, because I haven't been drinking as much as I was at one time, just trying to deal with stress. And I think it's okay to have those open communications, and not be afraid for me to tell the world that maybe I was facing some issues with that.
It is. Hey, well, Sean Tindell, we'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. When I think about being a former CEO of a media company, a regional media company, a couple thousand employees, that's a lot to think about. And I remember I had a calendar, obviously, that was almost always full, and a to-do list that was almost always full, and board meetings to prepare for. And man, I didn't really have any time for myself. I mean, on any given day, there's no telling what I had to focus on. And by the way, in my retirement, I don't miss having to do any of that. But I think about your role, Sean Tindell, the Commissioner of Public Safety here in Mississippi. You probably don't have a shortage of things to focus on. Okay, so let's see. Tuesday, you did a grand opening of the new Capitol Police headquarters. Really terrific new headquarters for Capitol Police in Jackson. But then from there, you go to DeSoto County, because there's always something to do in your world, isn't there?
There is, and we've tried to have these regional meetings with our law enforcement partners. So we met with the sheriffs in the northwest part of the state, as well as the police chiefs, and they were gracious enough to invite us to a meeting that they try to hold regularly. And we opened the floor for discussions about things that we could do better at the Department of Public Safety through law enforcement standards and training, and NBI and the crime lab, and a lot of the things that we oversee, but mainly just having those conversations. And so I think it was very fruitful. And look, We've done that in Tupelo area. We've done that in Oxford. We've done that on the coast. We've done it over in Meridian. So we've tried to really reach out to our law enforcement partners so that we can keep that line of communication open. And really that's just a normal day at DPS. The day fills up with meetings to address various issues that we have, and whether it's at a driver service station or Homeland Security, there's always something to discuss or something to work on. And we do have a great team. My team here is committed to public safety, so that certainly makes the job for me a lot easier. But improving those relationships across the state is important. I've just never been a commissioner that said I'm going to prop my feet up here at headquarters and try to do it all from here. So we try to get out and about and meet with folks from Tupelo to Moss Point and Moss Point to DeSoto County.
Yeah. Hey, listen. In the wake of Helene and Milton and this incredible disasters that both of those hurricanes created, it sickens me, frankly, to watch the politicization of a disaster and the recovery effort after a disaster. It really does. And we faced that after Hurricane Katrina, and I could do a whole show about it, and I won't. So I'll leave it at that. But one of the beauties of seeing the aftermath is the way the states, I don't care if you're a Democratic state or Republican state, the way that you guys use a central database to be able to determine how you can help each other. And that is, I love the way whether it be the Mississippi Department of Public Safety or whether it be power companies across Mississippi or you name it, the way that we rally our forces to help in the aftermath, that's an incredible positive aspect of a disaster, isn't it?
It really is. And even beforehand, if we're talking about contraflow on our interstates, helping people get in and out of, areas that are facing major disasters, coordinating with LSP, coordinating with the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency if we need to turn those contraflow plans on. And then afterwards, coordinating emergency responses through states' various emergency management directors is something that's really come about a lot since Katrina, because, one of the things that happened in Katrina is everybody just showed up from all over, and you almost had too many people coming from different directions. And now, we just sent a group to North Carolina to assist the folks up there that are still dealing with the effects of Helena. But that request came through MEMA, who contacted us and said, okay, now we need some law enforcement here. I fully anticipate that in another couple of weeks, we'll probably need to send some folks to Florida. But those are all coordinated efforts between various states and our folks. To their credit, DPS and other agencies are always ready to respond because that's what's in their heart. It's going to take time away from their family. They're going to miss some events, but they want to go help their fellow man. And it's very humbling to watch that from a leadership perspective, the selflessness that these first responders have to be the first to help.
I love it. I love it so much. You guys and Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks just recently sent quite a number of people there to help on in a number of different ways. And what I have found, unfortunately, having been involved in recovery efforts after difficult storms or tornadoes or the oil spill, whatever, is that people who get involved in your case, people from your department or the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, when they go there, it changes them. They often say when they come back is that they got more from going there than they gave while they were there. That the human experience of seeing, when you push everything else aside and see how our fellow man can help each other, there's something incredibly powerful about that, isn't there?
Absolutely. And it's something, earlier we were talking about young people, and I think we do so much these days to shield our youth from seeing traumatic events or seeing bad things. And I was thinking about my children the other night that I really want to get them on a mission trip so they can see how other parts of the world live. And it's important to see that because it gives you a lot of perspective, gives you a lot of empathy. And I think improves you as a person to the realities of the world and how you can help others. Yeah,
we did that with our kids, Sean, and we don't regret it at all. And it gives you perspective. It helps you understand where Mississippi fits in, not just to the U.S., but to the world. And it's a huge, huge learning. Sean Tindell, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Always enjoy it. This has been a very unique conversation, a little different than normal. But
yeah, it has been. It's been really good. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you.